Great. Then this is the moment where I do the little waiting thing to make sure that I can see that we're live. I think we are, but always got to check. And I also need to configure the drawing tablet. Let's do that as well. This works. Grand. Still not seeing my thing live yet. What is up with that? Let's hit reload. I can see myself now. Great. Okay, so we are live, which is good. So hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about a new tool. This tool is called Marimo, and it's kind of a funny coincidence how we got here. And I think I should just tell you a little bit of like how we got here by just showing you this one and the classic thing that Jupyter does. So I'm just going to open up Jupyter, and hopefully that's going to serve as a nice little introduction and motivation, etc. And I'm just going to open up some notebook. The notebook itself is not necessarily that important, but it kind of helps to paint the picture in the story that I'm about to tell. So this is a Jupyter Notebook. This is from a previous episode. Nothing that new under the sun. One streaming thing that I got to do. All right, and we're good. Thanks everyone for joining, by the way. If you could let us know where you're tuning in from, that would always be super fun and neat. But I was having a look at this Jupyter Notebook thing over here. And as much as I totally dig it, it was starting to dawn on me, you know, it is kind of linear. So it's kind of like normal Python code. You got code over here. You can run this cell. Then you can run the cell below over here. And as I was thinking about code, it makes total sense. But it does kind of feel like the way that you also start thinking about the code is kind of linear. So you've got your first cell. Then we're going to go on to the next cell. Then we're going to go on to the next cell. And it really feels like there's a start somewhere. And then eventually we end up somewhere. But then I was also thinking about Jupyter widgets that I like to use. And Jupyter widgets are just a little bit different. Because what they allow you to do is they allow you to have some output on the side here that's kind of like an interactive element. So you can imagine there's kind of like a slider over here. Or stuff that I really like to do is I like to have like a scatter chart where you might be able to make selections, so to say. And that's really cool. Like you can have those interactive inputs. And you can actually often get the values of those interactive inputs back into a cell over here. But it did start to dawn on me, like, the way, especially if you start using widgets, the way of the interaction is less like a linear line going forward all the time, and it's kind of a little bit more like a DAG. So there are inputs over here. So I might have like a slider, let's say, and my pen is doing a bit of tomfoolery. But maybe I have a slider, and that updates a block of code over here, which in turn renders a chart. But it also updates a block of code over here, which also needs input from the slider. Or what I'm getting at is that some applications are definitely more like a DAG than a linear sequence of steps. People are asking about the software that I'm drawing with. I'm using ScreenBrush. It's a Mac app, and I have a cheap Huion tablet that I'm using to draw over here. So back to this idea, like I was actually talking to some people, like once in a while or so, I have a virtual coffee with someone from the visualization community. And I was actually urging someone to think about, hey, maybe what we need is kind of like a Jupyter Notebook, but where these cells are a little bit less like this linear system, and that we kind of have cells where they're kind of more like nodes. Or we can kind of have like a Jupyter cell that when it's updating, it will also update all of its children or something like that. I was kind of wondering, like, what would the experience be like if the Jupyter Notebook was more like that? And basically the response was, oh, Vincent, I think there's a notebook that does that. It's called Marimo. And that's kind of how I sort of got interested in this. So the whole preface of this was, hey, I don't know if this is preferable for everything, but there are these things, especially with widgets, where maybe something like Marimo makes a bit of sense. And that's also something I went ahead and explored. there are also things for which I think the notebook still has some things going for it. But especially this interactive bit and this whole idea of maybe we're not dealing with linear cells, maybe code is more like a DAG where things just automatically update. That is kind of the surface area where Marimo tries to cover some good ground. And having played with it, I do think it does a few things very well. So that's what I want to have a look at today. So maybe just to get started with like the first demo, one thing I could do over here, and this is like Jupyter, right? But I could write down a equals 1, and then I can also write something like b equals let's say plus 1, right? And if I were to display a and b, then in a normal Jupyter cell, you are going to notice that if I were to change a to be equal to 10, let's say, that b has not automatically updated just yet. And the reason is that in Jupyter land, this cell hasn't run yet. So if I want b to automatically update as it's listening to a, then I need to actually run this cell. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to go into an environment where that will actually happen automatically. So if I were to write code like this, you actually have to be aware of the fact that whenever you write code that depends on another variable, that it will automatically update. So one benefit of that is that you don't have to run code like this, because you don't have to rerun the cell, so to say. But the downside is that if you are doing something heavy, you might have to do some extra work. If you're doing quick interactive stuff, it's totally good. But if you're doing things where, oh, it might actually take 10 seconds to compute something, you want to start thinking about caching a bit more. But let's see what this is like in Marimo now. So I'm going to close up Jupyter, but this is the first thing I kind of want to demo because it's like the main conceptual difference. So I'm going to leave this site, leave this thing. I'm going to turn off Jupyter. So Jupyter MB Classic was what I was running before. And now I'm going to tell Marimo to go ahead and edit a file that I've got locally. And we're going to dive into this in a bit. But the stuff that you save is not is a Python file instead of a big JSON file. But okay, I'm starting up Marimo and I'm opening up this one notebook thing that I've got. And here is what that thing would kind of look like. So very much a single environment thing. It's not like there's tabs. I don't have access to the terminal directly here. This is basically just a notebook. But just to give like the first demo that I just mentioned to show that that actually works, I'm going to write down a is equal, keyboard shortcut, a is equal to, let's say 1. And I could say something like b is equal to a and then plus 1, right? Bob's your uncle. If I were to show a and b together, then you can see that, actually just show b because it's kind of cleaner. You can see that b is equal to 2 as we would expect. But if I now were to set a equal to 10 and then hit run on this one cell, then boom, that's a big difference. We see that b kind of automatically updates. B is now equal to 11. So you don't have to actually manually run a cell in order to, like, I did have to run this one cell because I was editing it. Like I did have to specify that a actually got a new value, but any dependents, like any children, they will automatically update. So that is like probably the main difference. Like everything else that's different in Marimo kind of follows from this. But yeah, that's like the main conceptual difference. And if there are any questions at this point in time, now would be a great time to ask. But from this, we're going to see like what other things are possible. Oh, so there's questions like coming in, like since it's not linear and more node-based, have you thought about making a canvas-based node system? We're going to get to that actually, because there's a really fun party trick that they allow you to do with this. But we are going to go in the direction of, hey, can we define nodes and maybe build programs like that? Because that is actually something you could go to with this whole thing. But okay, this is pretty cool, right? Like we can start thinking about writing apps this way, and that's, you know, kind of nice. But Marimo also comes with batteries included. So there's like a thing that you can do. Like you can say something like from Marimo, or like yeah, let's actually do the right thing. So import Marimo as mo. That's something I can do, and then I can, yeah, let's just first import that. Name error a is not defined. Oh, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. So one thing that's a bit different compared to Jupyter, if I were to write down equals 1 over here, right? Everything runs fine. That's totally cool. Another thing that's different, by the way, is, and this actually got me a few times, is that in Jupyter, you have your code over here, and then whatever is the output is rendered below. That's something that you see below the cell typically. But in Marimo land, that's actually not what's happening. In Marimo land, the thing that's actually rendering renders on top. And there's also kind of a reason for it. Because what you can do is you can choose to, if you have larger code cells, you can choose to hide it. Because at some point, the thing that the code renders is secondary to the, the thing that the code renders is actually primary, and the code itself is kind of secondary. We care about the interactivity in this domain. So, okay, stuff renders on top. That's kind of interesting. But it also means that error messages will render on top. And if I were to remove this a equals 1 line over here, then b below can no longer be defined. So the moment that I go and do this, oop, name error. And initially, this might come across as a bit weird because in Jupyter land, you are kind of used to the output always being below. But in this particular case, you can see that something is actually rendered on top and that the full stack trace can be seen below over here. Kind of a nice touch. If there ever is an error, you can just go ahead and click this search on Google button over here. So you can just Google the error message. It can be useful sometimes. But in this case, I'm just going to remove all these cells that we're no longer needing because I'm just interested in importing Marimo directly. But like error handling and that kind of stuff is a bit different here, again, because the way that we propagate values is not cell-based. It is more node-based. It's based on these variables. So one person is asking, like, can we see the Python file? We are going to get to that. I just want to show off a few things first. Because it's easier to explain what you see in the Python file if I show you a bunch of features first. But yeah, let's make a new cell. And one thing you'll notice is that there's pretty good autocomplete. And Marimo has a UI library. So there's all sorts of UI stuff that I can go ahead and generate here. It's like a date time picker. Let's actually check that out. So there's a date time picker. Yeah, so there's a UI element where I can select the date and a time and the calendar and all that stuff is kind of nice. And what I could go ahead and do is I can say, well, that's date time. Let's just give that a variable, right? There we go. And we should also, of course, if we put it in a variable and we want it to render, we should also just have the variable at the end here. That way Marimo knows what to render. But another thing that's kind of interesting and cute is that datetime variable that has a value that's attached. And that is something that I can always grab from Python. So if I were to now have this UI element and I'm just gonna, I don't know, select a different date, then this date value over here is also just totally going to update. Let's put 30 in here just for good measure, you know, so you can see the stuff is different. There is like a native two-way binding, so to say. So that's definitely kind of like a nice touch. And something that Marimo also does, if you go to the is it? I think it's markdown directly. You can pass an f string in here, and you can do something like I selected and then the curly bracket thing date time. Yep. And I should be able to run this. Yeah. So you can also have these UI elements inside of Markdown, and Marimo kind of knows how to play nicely with it. And this can actually be kind of fun. Let's now actually go with a slider instead. Oh, right. And if I'm doing something with a slider, you have to say it starts somewhere, it ends somewhere, and there's a step size, I think, if I recall correctly, something like that. Yeah. So, you know. But one thing that's kind of interesting and cool is you can definitely see that if this variable represents one value, and if it's placed in multiple places in the app, Marimo does know how to properly deal with it. And this makes a lot of sense from a consistency perspective, even if you render something inside of a markdown cell. So that's, you know, kind of a nice touch, kind of a nice two-way binding thing. That also means that if I wanted to, I could maybe have lots of variables that represent values that I'm interested in. And then I can have a nice little UI for all the values that I want to change. So I have this many apples. Like, let's pretend that we're dealing with apples here. Right, and then apples. If I were now to hit play over here, by the way, it's going to give an error. If I hit play on this one, that's fine, right? But I can specify the number of apples. If I divide that by 8, is a bit of a silly example. I have apples.value divided by, or times 8, I should say, times 8 pieces. All right. There we go. And this will all just automatically kind of nicely update. So this is kind of the start where you can start seeing some interactivity and, you know, you can kind of rethink the notebook here. That's kind of the interesting phenomenon. And also the fact that you're able to shrink some of this code stuff down, like maybe I want to shrink this and then definitely focus more on the UI parts and how they interact. That is the thing that Marimo tries to solve here. It's not so much about, oh, we have an interactive way of just dealing with Python code. It's definitely also, oh, but we also care about these UI elements. That's definitely the vibe I'm getting from using this tool. We are getting some questions in from Cape Town, the closest place to Antarctica in this time zone. Sometimes I'd like to know how I can observe cell values changes from the JavaScript in the Wasm version. We'll get to that. So what if I just want to render the value in markdown instead of the slider? I mean, that you would use the dot value attribute. That's how you would get there. But okay. So hopefully we get the sliders and we kind of get the UI elements and that has like a nice two-way binding kind of a thing. What else can we do? Well, I'm only going to be able to scratch the surface, really. But I figured as a demo, you know, can I do something fun and interesting with scikit-learn was kind of the first thing I tried to do. This is, after all, something for probable. We do like to do scikit-learn stuff. So, okay, I have a cell over here that just generates me a classification data set. This is just sort of make a classification from scikit-learn. Nothing super scary. Then I figured let's have some sort of a UI element here where there is just the number of trees and there's a maximum depth that I can set for a random forest classifier. So there's a bunch of code over here. We'll get to some of that stuff in a bit, but basically the code that I've got over here does a few extra things. But the main thing I'm able to do is I'm able to sort of slide around and you know, set the number of trees and set the max output, all that kind of good stuff. Below, over here in this cell, I'm actually using this. So you can see that I've got my slider for the number of trees and I'm grabbing the value out of it. And I'm doing the same thing for maximum depth over here. And again, the output, like I'm fitting to the data, but the output of the cell is rendered on top. So you can actually see that the parameters that go in here are what I have in my slider. So every time that I were to like rerun, every time that I slide and change the value, you can also see that this whole training procedure just reruns. And this is pretty cool, but hopefully you do recognize that although this is great and like a cool demo, training a new model on the fly as you change UI elements can get quite heavy. So you might want to think about caching a thing or two here. But okay, like we do get a lot of stuff for free. Like we're able to slide around. We're able to sort of see stuff update relatively quickly. I can hit Command H to hide the code because I don't really care about that maybe at this level. Maybe I mainly care about the UI elements. And, you know, you can kind of see, like, once you get the thing working, you hide the code. It is kind of nice that as you have a notebook, you can slide around and you can see stuff update. But I figured I'd go a step further and also just kind of show a classification report. And I'm doing this on the train data. Like, this is not super good data science practice, but one thing I thought was kind of cute is if I set the max depth super low and if I set the max tree super low, you can see that it has an effect on precision and recall and all that, which is kind of what I would expect. But we are now at this point where, okay, we can kind of hook stuff together. We have some Python code to perform some basic operation. We have some inputs and we have some like visual outputs, and we can also do stuff with charts. Like all that stuff is totally possible. But you might wonder at this point, like, hey, can I also build something for end users? Because it's really great that I can have an interactive experience just for me, but maybe this can also be a very nice way for me to give a dashboard to Business Bob, the archetype that you probably have in your company that demands reports and that sort of a thing. And in order to automate like whatever questions you get from business, it'd be great if you can turn this into some sort of app, kind of. That would be really neat. And there is actually pretty good support for it. The way to get there, like, you need to click around a bit because I don't like you can toggle this thing that's called an app view. Because right now we are kind of in development mode, but you can imagine that at some point we can turn this into a proper standalone app. And that's a thing that it can do. So I can toggle to the app view. Um, and the reason why I'm sliding it in is because my face is otherwise in front of it. You can say that you want to have slides. You can say that you want to have this as a vertical app, but you can also select this grid setting. And what's actually pretty dang cute is that you can actually slide stuff in. So just to give a example, I had that UI element that renders me these sliders, right? And I can totally just, let's just move that around. Let's move it over here. You know, that's like a UI input thing. Then I also have my random forest classifier thing that I can just totally drag in. So let's make that a bit bigger, right? That feels kind of all right. Let's move that maybe somewhere over there. Oh yeah, and I had that like cell that had that markdown stuff with the with the classification report. That feels kind of nice. Let's maybe move that over here. Okay, and you know I can increase the number of trees, and oh yeah, this all seems wired up. And this is where we kind of get to that comfy UI thing. You can kind of imagine each cell inside of Marimo to be its own node, and it's to produce output as well as variables that can be used elsewhere. But in the end, if you're building an app, you kind of only care about a few of these outputs, and you can kind of just click and drag them together here. And this, I thought at least, is super duper neat. Because it's pretty easy to just hack around and get a kind of an interface going. And notice that this is a notebook that I'm running locally using Marimo Edit. But let's now actually go back to VS Code, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this from running. Clear. And instead of calling Marimo Edit, I'm just going to call Marimo Run. And it's taking the same notebook, but now it's basically running this as a runnable app. And you know, you can kind of zoom in, you can kind of zoom out. It's kind of this page. It really still tries to present like a page that you look at. And like the UI is relatively basic, but part of me does look at this and kind of go like, huh, this does kind of feel kind of like Streamlit in a way, while it still has a lot of the Jupyter Notebook convenience. And it also feels like instead of like Jupyter is still really great at, oh, let's basically make Python a little bit more interactive and a little bit more hackable. And it kind of feels like Marimo is coming from a slightly different angle, which is, oh, let's actually get UI components to work nicely with Python code so we can build these kinds of interfaces. So it's a little bit closer to the Streamlit use case, I think. But the fact that I'm able to whip stuff like this up relatively quickly, I will say, is kind of neat. Because you don't, like, it still feels very familiar if you're used to Python. But it is still a different experience because the focus is just so much on the visual. But yeah, this I do think is a really, really nice trick. The fact that you're able to just generate something like this real quick. And yeah, people will rightfully also compare it to Gradio and that sort of thing. Again, like be aware though that you do get into gnarly areas if you are doing like heavy compute when doing this. So that's pretty cool. I just want to quickly now show that file in Marimo intro was, I think, the name. Yeah. There we go. So one thing that's also kind of interesting is we are still dealing with a Python file so far. We're not doing anything with JSON files as we would do in Jupyterland. And the way that it kind of works is every cell is basically an unnamed function that has a decorator around it. Internally, what Marimo does, I think, is it just inspects what is happening in here. And then it will probably build its own magic DAG kind of a thing in the background on your behalf. But all the cells itself are just really Python functions. And every time you hit save, this Python file gets an update. So there was this one cell with lots of stuff that was commented out, and you can kind of see the effect here. Also, one thing that's kind of cool at the bottom, there is this thing at the end, if name equals main app run. So technically, this Python file, you should be able to run it like any normal Python script. And when you do this, it will just run all the cells in sequence. But one thing that is just kind of neat is that when you do stuff like this, you're still dealing with a basic Python file. And something about that I can also imagine is kind of appealing. I personally don't mind the JSON stuff that Jupyter does because there's tools that will help you clean it. But the fact that you're just really dealing with a Python file over here does feel like it's kind of nice. There are some extra things in here that like there, in this case, like this function is using a widget, and therefore so this cell, pardon, is using something that's like a widget, and then it will sort of magically take that widget and add it as an input to the cell. So there is some magic that Marimo is doing under the hood, but you can still make it behave like Python does normally, because in the end, it will just run like a normal Python script. That said, I haven't even told you about what I think is the coolest party trick just yet. So let's do that. So I'm going to again call Marimo, and we're going to again edit this Marimo intro file. So this is the notebook that I had earlier. All is well. Definitely, all is good. But there's a button on top over here, and this share button. And I can actually turn this entire notebook into a WebAssembly link. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And this does something that I do think is, it'd be a shame if we didn't take a moment to just appreciate what's happening here. So when you look at the URL, you're going to notice there's this big blob at the end. That is basically I think it's a zipped-ish, like it's a compiled representation of the Python file, which I can then send over the wire via the URL. And then it's probably doing some sort of thing in the background with Wasm in order to run this. But it also means that I'm actually running Python from the browser. Like, this is the Wasm trick. We are moving Python into the front end. And in order to like prove that, what I can do is I can hit inspect on the browser tab, and I can have a look at the network. And what I can from here do is I can move this slider around. And you can see that as I do this, the stuff over here updates. So definitely some Python code is running, but no request is being sent to a backend. So the Python code is actually running within the browser itself. And the way that they seem to get away with this, like it's all pretty lightweight, but the way they get away with this, I think they're running a version of Wasm Python that's built on top of micropip, which is, I think, MicroPython. But the thing that I think is just super duper interesting is that note how this can also just update and run scikit-learn. So if I were to do something experimental in a documentation page, right? Oh, we can run scikit-learn on the front end via Wasm. Oh, wait, for docs purposes, this could be like stunningly amazing if you think about it. There are a lot of things on the scikit-learn docs and a lot of my projects as well, where you kind of need the interactivity to properly show what's going on. And I think I've got like a pretty interesting example below over here, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, right. Like I think that the issue here, I might fix this in a bit, but like I do remember this issue actually. But like you can imagine that I have my trusty little draw data app, and I think I've got it down below here, right? And this draw data thing just works perfectly fine, right? And then as a result, I have a chart below that kind of just updates kind of nicely, and I can draw some more. Oh, and this chart below updates kind of nicely. And what you're looking at here is the result of a scikit-learn model making a prediction over what I'm just drawing. And right now it's failing because I was using polars in order to make this chart. And yeah, I think I should be able to, if there's time at the end, I'll change this to pandas, and I can see if I can get this running in Wasm land. Wasm will never support everything ever, but the fact that I actually got scikit-learn to work in Wasm in a way that's actually, it loads in a few seconds, that is dang impressive on its own as well. And for documentation purposes, I so see a lot of good use cases for this. Like that I think is the coolest party trick so far. It's not just the fact that I have cells that I can combine in kind of a clever little GUI really, really quickly, but the fact that that GUI can also load in Wasm land, that is really, really nice because that'll do wonders for a lot of educational purposes, I think. Um, so yeah, like that's the thing that I think impresses me the most so far with everything that I've seen, and I can dive into some more things that Marimo can do. But this on its own is something that, yeah, super cool on my end. Some questions came in, so I'm just gonna have a look at those. Is it possible to send? Oh, a bunch of questions actually. So gotta scroll up a bit. So yeah, cool. People are saying cool stuff. Thanks. Is it possible to send standard error and outputs to the grid view, like there are warnings and stuff? Um, I think probably is what I'll say. If I recall correctly, um, I might be confusing this with Jupyter now, so I want to be careful with what I say. But it wouldn't surprise me if it wouldn't surprise me at all if you're able to add like some logging and stuff. Like the thing that I don't know is to what extent you're able to host this yourself, because this is running via the Marimo app website. So I don't know how easy it is to host your own Wasm thing. I need to double check that. Um, but you should be able to like print stuff, and that should also be able to like, even if you aren't able to print stuff, if you're able to render it to markdown eventually, you can add that as a cell, which is an output, so that should work. Um, yeah, so I haven't checked how to self-host the Wasm version. I don't know if that's a thing that's possible. I do want to check that after, actually, because that is a thing I'm interested in doing. Actually, technically, what I think you are able to do, I think there was a syntax where you could do something like question mark over here, and then render equals true. There's something with the URL that you can do. I don't know about self-hosting, but I think you can iframe this. Like that's, I think, the trick that most people would do here. Yeah, so like one thing about creating an environment, what I can do, if I were to take this one cell, I can run this one cell, and there's this micropip thing that they do allow. And when I run this, I am going to sort of pip install stuff into this environment. So you can see I ran the command that says, hey, let's install a bunch of stuff. In particular, I'm installing Altair, and you can see that it's actually making lots of requests right now from the Pyodide. My Pyodide is doing that. And this will pull in basically all sorts of dependencies that I might need. That's kind of how you can also install some third-party libraries. Not all third-party libraries, by the way, are supported, just a subset, because again, this is Wasm land. Some things are just kind of different. But if it doesn't work initially, do try it this way. You have to asynchronously await until the install is done, but this should allow you to also add some missing dependencies. And I think if I were to go here, and if I were to sort of, hang on, where's the button? Yeah, so over here, I should be able to go to, isn't there like a button over here where, yeah, oh, there we go. So this is the app that I made, and you can see that also in Wasm, I am able to run this as an app, kind of, with the Marimo UI around it, but yeah. I'll check later what I can do in terms of like self-hosting. I haven't double-checked that, actually. Going back to the notebook locally, though, because there are a few things that I also just want to mention briefly that will maybe help you if you are going to be making Marimo apps. So I'm just going to hit clear. And yeah, we're going to go back into edit mode. Let's close up some of these tabs. So, okay, like we have the basic demo. We understand the sliders. We understand that there's a UI binding. We can also turn this into a nice web app. All that stuff is good. But let's talk about some somewhat more maybe advanced topics. So what I've got over here, like I told you about these sliders that I've got, right? Number of trees, max depth. I also have a chart over here. This is an Altair chart. And the whole thinking, and let me just kind of hide that. And can I click and drag and move something up? I think I have to like, yeah, so I can click and drag, move that up here. That's also kind of the interesting thing, by the way. The order of the cells matters way less now because you can kind of click and drag stuff together. It will just sort of internally figure out in what ways the nodes are ordered. But the thing that's interesting, at least in this app, is you can see that I can sort of go through a whole bunch of like a number of trees, and I can also do something with the max depth. And you can see that as I sort of move around over here, that then this chart kind of updates. Every time that I set a new value in the slider, we can also see that the chart itself is updating. And you can kind of imagine this to be like all the values. We can compile something like super fast, maybe something written in C or in Rust, and then upload that binary. And then that binary can go ahead and run inside the browser. That's kind of the idea. That's the idea behind Wasm. And Wasm has some features where that's also kind of nice and contained. The binary that is run on the browser that's super fast, it can't just access your file system, and you have to ask for the right permissions, and it's kind of like a sandboxed environment. And recently, via Pyodide, there's been an effort to get Python working inside the front end of the browser with this trick. Before, if you wanted to run something inside of a tutorial website or something like that, and someone wrote Python and you have to sort of evaluate it, it's always a bit of a scary thing because you're going to run untrusted code on a server somewhere and hackers might be able to abuse it. So if we are able to do tutorials on the front end, that would be super neat because then a whole lot of security concerns go away. And also, we don't have to provision heavy servers to run heavy compute. It can all just kind of happen inside the browser. So that's the idea behind Wasm, so to say. Like we're able to compile binaries, but for Python people, we might just be able to compile a binary that's just uploaded with all the Python stuff that you might need. And this basically removes the need for some of the backends in tutorial websites. And for a project like Scikit-learn, I can imagine having some interactive Python code that you can just copy and paste and you can see charts move interactively. Something about that feels very appealing. But anyway, back to this. If this were a normal Jupyter notebook, the way you might be able to build this is you might be able to say, oh, wait, there's a Python list, and I'm going to append something to that Python list every time that there's an update over here. That's the way you would do that in normal Jupyter land, so to say. And that's cool, but this is not normal Jupyter. What you're able to do is you're able to declare a new list, and then in the same cell, you might be able to sort of put stuff in that list. But if we think about the nodes, right, this is still very much a single value. And I want to turn that single value into state, kind of. Every time that I move this thing around, I want state to update. And in order to get that to work, in order to also be able to make charts like this, as you play around with lots of UI widgets, you are going to have to pull off a trick that Marimo supports. But that's what this stuff is all about. So in Marimo, what you could do is you could say, hey, there is just some state, and that kind of makes it a special node in the big graph, so to say. And that state, you can get the update. You can get the state from that, or you can set the state from that. And what I'm doing below over here is basically I'm saying, look, the state, when it's initialized, it is just an empty list. And whenever there's a change on this slider, I kind of have an event over here. And then I'm saying, look, set the drawn state by grabbing the previous drawn state and then adding this tuple to it. That's basically what's happening here. And doing this, it's like a getter and a setter in a way. Like you can get the value or you can set the value. But whenever I'm setting the value, I'm first getting it, appending something to it, and then putting it back. That's basically how this works. And it's a little bit of extra effort, but in order to actually have something that's stateful whenever you try lots of different values, like maybe you want to keep track of the history of all the UI things that you've changed and stuff, in order to do that, you are going to have to use this concept of state. And this is something that I did hit my head on, at least initially. This is something you are going to want to think about. One thing that is pretty fun, though, and I think, yeah, some stuff that you can now do is you can also maybe add a button, and then when you click the button, you clear the history. Like that is stuff that you can sort of build with this, but you are going to need to think about state. Like that is a theme in general with this app. Another thing that I do just want to mention that I do think is super duper cool. If you've been following me for a while, you might have seen me build this thing before. This is a little UI that I built for initially Jupyter Notebooks that just allows you to draw a data set. Fun fact, the backend for this is a tool called AnyWidget. If you go to the Sample Space podcast, the first interview is with the person who made AnyWidget. But the cool thing about AnyWidget is that it doesn't just support Jupyter, it also supports lots of these other environments, and Marimo is one of them. So one thing that I am able to do is I'm able to tell Marimo, hey, look, this is an AnyWidget. So this scatter thing that's like a normal AnyWidget. And because of this, the widget is now properly registered on the Marimo side. But it also means that if I were to draw some more data over here, like the actual drawn points, that is something that I also have access to. And this will also be super dynamic. Like cells will automatically run when I do stuff like this. So just to give like I think pretty cool and interesting demo of that, what I am also able to do is I am able to do this thing where, oh, let's draw some stuff over here. A machine learning model updates, and oh, look, I'm also able to update a chart. And similar to before, I can kind of go to my grid view and sort of say, oh, that sounds like a super cool app. Maybe I want to show that to my boss. And then I can just click and drag this draw data thing. There we go. And I also want to click and drag that's matplotlib chart. And like you can kind of mix and match. That's kind of the big idea over here. But the fact that these AnyWidgets are also supported. Oh wait, I don't want to terminate. I just want to go back to the edit mode. Like that is also like cool stuff, I would say. Like you can really smell from a distance that what they're going for over here is the interactivity, and that is the thing that they seem to want to provide. I think that this was mainly it in terms of content that I really wanted to show and discuss. It takes a while to get used to the fact that stuff renders on top instead of at the bottom, and the fact that you really got to mind the state. All of that stuff is definitely different. I would also want to mention like the UI and the shortcuts are just totally different. That really threw me off initially. Like I'm used to the fact that I can be inside of a cell or outside of it, and the cell can remain selected. But in Jupyter, you would hit A or B to make a new cell above or below. Here, if I'm not mistaken, it's Command Shift O or Command O or something like that. But yeah, Command Shift H is the shortcut helper, and like I really frequently go here just because I forget these shortcuts all the time. My muscle memory is really focused on Jupyter, so like be aware that that's just going to be a bit of a pain. There are also like plenty of other features over here. Like you can explore the variables. That's like they've got a tab for that. You should be able to attach databases, so you can do stuff like that. There are like some cells, and you can sort of see how they are supposed to run when they are in. Like, there's all sorts of widgets here that can definitely sort of help you. One, I think, kind of this is kind of like a cool touch. Like what I can do is whenever I hover my cursor over something, there's actually like a live documentation class that opens up here. So if I were to go to the AnyWidget thing, by the way, on my scatter widget, you basically get the doc string that is on the scatter widget itself. And this is kind of like the contextual helper that you're used to from Jupyter Notebook. It's just a little bit, it's like a built-in thing. This is also just kind of a nice feature, I would say. They also have these Copilot like things that you can attach. So if you like, I think you can apply Claude or like some of those LLM bots to kind of help you code. That's something you can totally do. So it is basically a reimagining of what a notebook could be, but the perspective that they're coming from is very much oh, let's make it a DAG, and let's focus on the UI elements that you can kind of wire together and make something super reactive. Sometimes that's what you want. If you are interested in doing something interactive, but you're also training a big neural network, let's say, then this is probably not what you want. And this is something where Jupyter still kind of shines in my mind. If I'm doing something where, oh, I need a progress bar because it takes a while, and after that I'm interested in seeing a few charts, and then I might want to make a few changes here and there. For those kinds of longer training loopy things, which by the way is still a lot of data science, that's something where the Jupyter Notebook kind of works well for me still, mainly because I'm not doing too many widget interactive stuff yet. If, however, you are interested in doing something that's super interactive, widgety, and that sort of thing, then Marimo might make more sense to explore. It definitely does feel like an upgrade over Gradio and Streamlit to me, if you ask me, just because it feels like it's less magical. It feels like you're more still dealing with Python, even though it does wrap around and that sort of thing. So yeah, I can maybe explore some extra stuff if people are interested. Oh yeah, that might be fun to show. Like, yeah. So there's a reset button over here. So I can set all of these points, right? Like I can sort of move the slider around. This updates the state. But below here, I've got this reset button, and it basically says whenever there's a change, whenever this is clicked, I can set the drawn state to just be this this one list with only one thing in it. I can hit reset, and then this chart over here would update. I guess the easiest way to show is just put that in a nice little grid. Let's move this thing out. Let's move the sliders back in. So there's my sliders. There's my little Altair chart. Let's make you a bit. I got him. This is a little bit annoying. Let's make you a bit bigger. There we go. And let's also move in the reset button, right? I can sort of add stuff, add stuff, add stuff. I can hit reset. It resets. Add stuff. There will be apps where this is just going to be super useful. You might have some state that you want to do stuff with. But yeah, again, just the fact that you're able to just click and drag these components from Python together, it's kind of neat. So yeah, and the fact that you are also able to at some point do more Wasm-y stuff, I do think there's a lot of future in that as well. I'm also coming at this kind of from the education angle. Not every Python package will totally work, but plenty of them will. So yeah, this is definitely not bad. So on that note, are there any questions about this? Are any things people would like me to like quickly check right now? I think I've shown you like I've kicked the tires a bit in this thing, so people hopefully can imagine what they might be able to build with it. The folks behind this project have a Discord. That's also where I met a few people. They seem to be quite helpful. They're eager to get feedback. I might also check if they're interested in being on the podcast. I think we can definitely discuss some cool things. But yeah, definitely feels like it's definitely cool that people try to reimagine tools sometimes, and it does feel like this is kind of a nice reimagination of what a notebook could be for Python people. There are settings to move the cell output below. Like, oh, hang on, Miles is joining. Miles is actually from Marimo, by the way. Hi, Miles. There are settings to move the cell output below and to customize. Yeah, so that's actually good to mention as well, because there are a bunch of settings actually. So do you want the light or the dark theme? I mean, there are like very sensible things that you can do here. There's also like, do you like a compact view or not? There's definitely settings as well that you can tune. I just haven't had the time to really go through everything. It's also my impression that the keyboard shortcuts, they also can be changed. But the main thing I do think is just fair to observe is you're probably, if you're looking at this, you're probably very, very used to Jupyter. And this is just not Jupyter. The Venn diagrams overlap a bit, but if you come to Marimo expecting a Jupyter, odds are that you're going to be disappointed and not going to explore the stuff that Marimo is actually pretty good at. The stuff where it really shines to me, in summary, is the fact that you're able to turn cells into this. Like, this is really the output of a DAG, kind of nicely done. Like, that feels great. And the Wasm stuff. Being able to export this into something that can just run on the front end, there's use cases for that, and that's a very, very cool trick. Is there a restart and run all hotkey? I think there's something along those lines, but so actually, I think everything except the state will automatically rerun. Is maybe the way to think about that. So what I think I am able to do yeah, so there's an undo thing. There's nothing to run. I can hit stop. Like if you're dealing with state, that might be a reason why you might want to have a reset actually. And Miles, who might be following along, would know the shortcut from his mind. I kind of don't, but um, I think in general, the way you think about Jupyter is sometimes you want to just reset everything because you really want to reset the state of all the variables and all the sliders, I guess. But because everything is just dynamic in a DAG here, that use case will be less of a thing, except for the state stuff. Like when you're drawing something into a list and you're keeping track of that, that will be something where you want to maybe reset. But all the other stuff, you should look at it as, oh no, it's just dynamic. Like if you want to set, it's not so much about resetting the state, it's just about setting the state all the time. Like usually you're dealing with a slider and it just sets the state to a new value. Oh, right. There's a command palette as well, right? It's Command K, I think. Yeah, that's also a good one to show. If you hit Command K, you get the command palette that pops up. This is also kind of a nice feature, I should say. And there is this restart kernel thing that you can go ahead and run. I've not really felt the need for this use case. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, right, because I moved this cell. This cell has to be moved back down again. Yeah. Small stuff. Yeah. How do I actually move back a cell that's kind of big? Can I can click and drag, I think, right? Oh, there it is. There we go. I think if I were to drag this down a bit, it should be fine. And if I were now to, because it's polar cell, yeah, I think I should be able to run it now. Why is it complaining? Solving unable to determine data type for a number of trees. Let's just run everything manually, right? So, oh, it was just, oh, it might be because the slider didn't have a proper default. Oh, yeah. I should set a default value. That's what's, I should set the value to be equal to a default, and that's the thing that went wrong there. Okay, fine. That's a minor issue. But like the one thing I will say about Marimo is there is actually kind of a lot to explore. Just like in Jupyter, there's like lots of stuff if you think about it. Marimo is still in active development as far as I know, and like people are also just adding features. So it's kind of hard to show everything in just a simple hour, I guess. But there is stuff to like. That's I guess the main story that I've got. The first hour was frustrating because you keep comparing it to Jupyter, but you do notice that the moment you're able to let that go, that then you're also a little bit more easily able to explore the stuff that Marimo can do that's actually different. Part of me might also advise, like, if you don't have the need to do something that's hyper interactive, maybe it's totally fine to just stick to Jupyter. Jupyter also has support for Jupyter widgets, and they're good, right? It's a good integration. The main thing I would consider is that Jupyter is really just interactive Python, and then they added widgets on top. And I think here the whole point was, well, we're going to start with widgets, and we're going to try to see if we can get Python to work nicely with those widgets. So again, it depends a bit on the mental entry point. But Marimo is good. Just the danger is that you're going to compare it to Jupyter too much. That's the main advice that I do have. Because that can prevent you just the first hour of frustration. Just see it as something different. That can really help. Yeah, if Miles is able to listen, like I don't know about the. We can also just look on the Marimo docs. Actually, Marimo has docs, so we can just check that. Marimo.app. Marimo docs Wasm self-host. Yeah, I think it's if I look at GitHub, I think there's a discussion around it. And it's an idea that they are considering but not working on if I'm just glancing at it quite quickly. And the way that you can embed it right now, you have to have everything in a single Python file. And the way you would then go about it, if I read this correctly, is you would come up with some sort of URL. You can set it to read mode, and then you're also able to set embed equals true via the URL. That way you can do the iframey thing. Self-hosted, I think, is currently not supported, but there is a discussion on GitHub about it. One that's reasonably active still, I think. But yeah, Miles will be the person to confirm that. It will be great if you're able to do that locally. But not supported as of yet is my impression. Cool. Then I guess this was the live stream. Hopefully people enjoyed it. Definitely feel free to give Marimo a spin. And yeah, there's probably lots of other details to explore. Like I'm pretty sure it's also possible. Like there's also a terminal at our disposal here. You know, I'm pretty sure we can get all sorts of standard output to also appear in the console somewhere. But the easiest way to explore that is just give this a spin yourself. A few things, because we have to wrap up due to time. Like my babysitter needs me downstairs in a bit. There are a few things that I think are worth just briefly mentioning. We do this live stream on behalf of Probable, and we have a fun announcement. If you go to our blog, you'll see that we have a new major milestone that we are happy to announce. The details are all written down here. Basically, we got another very welcome round of funding, but the funding round is a bit interesting because a lot of the funding came from the community. So some heavy hitters from the data science ecosystem, like Peter Wang from Anaconda, Travis Oliphant from NumPy fame, as well as folks from the QuantSight stack, they have actually chosen to invest in a company. It's kind of like a community investment vehicle that's taken place here. This is all super exciting and also kind of unique, so feel free to check out this blog post if that sounds like something you're interested in. At the end of the blog post, you can also see a link to our Discord group. So you can, I will just copy that actually in YouTube as well. If people are interested in chatting about us, about our content or stuff that we're building, they can do so here. Also note that we are also working on some tools that we might want to have testers for. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check out the Discord. You can talk to people like me. And finally, what I also have to mention is that for the next 2 weeks, unfortunately, we will not be able to do these live streams. The simple reason is that there are 2 conferences. Next week is PyData Amsterdam, which I will be attending, and I will also be speaking there. And the week after, it will be PyData Paris. PyData Paris will feature a lot of my colleagues. Like if you're interested in meeting the Probable team proper, I think everyone will be there. The Amsterdam event will probably just be me, maybe one extra colleague. But if you're interested in saying hi, do definitely come by. The PyDatas are usually fun events, so I do recommend people go if they haven't checked it out already. But unfortunately, because those events are during the week and also like kind of at the end of the week, it won't be possible for me to prepare the live stream and do it while having a conference in the middle. That's just a little bit too much on my plate. What we are going to do is we are still going to release the whiteboard videos. Like those will just be released as normal. But the live stream itself won't be taking place for the next 2 weeks, but we're going to be back after 2 weeks. Another thing that I also just kind of want to mention is we like the whiteboard videos. They're really cool, and we're going to keep on doing it. But we are playing with the idea in... yeah. Okay, so Marco is responding that, yeah, I'm also pretty bummed that Marco and I are speaking at the same time. Like, he was definitely on my top list of folks I wanted to see, and somehow the committee members planned us at the same time. That was indeed a bummer. But the point I wanted to make about the interviews, we have a new podcast up with Madelon Hulsebos. She's great. It's a fun talk. She's basically a researcher who has a PhD in the topic of how do you actually deal with the fact that in machine learning we have multiple tables instead of just one, and how can you find tables that are relevant, and those kinds of topics. But we figured we might want to do more podcasts. It's great to do whiteboard videos, but it also feels like the ecosystem is big enough that we also want to hear about like topics that are just a little bit more adjacent to scikit-learn, instead of just really focusing down on the innards of scikit-learn itself. So we are definitely keen on doing more podcasts, but it also means that you folks on the community can tell me who to interview. Definitely join the Discord to talk to me about that. I'm definitely open to suggestions. And one of the reasons why I'm going to PyData is also to meet people who might want to appear on the podcast. That's like one of the missions I've got for the events. And Tobias, I'm happy to hear that this has been the best hour you've ever spent waiting in a local government department. It's time well spent. Happy to hear it. But yeah, on that bombshell, I'm gonna go downstairs because the babysitter needs me. But hopefully y'all enjoyed the stream. Marimo is cool. Give it a look, and yeah, come talk to me on Discord. We're gonna have